Hello everybody, and thank you for tuning into today's episode of Armchair Gaming. I am your host, the Unbearable Gamer, hanging out with you. Today's episode should probably be the last episode we have on philosophy in Destiny 2. Last episode we touched on Osiris and how he's a badass philosopher with a gun. We're going to spend more time talking about Osiris, the philosopher. We'll spend some time talking about philosophers in general. We're going to talk a little bit about Plato's Republic, and we're going to kind of examine why it is Osiris maybe didn't fit the mold of a true ruler. Because in the Republic, there's this belief that the greatest rulers are philosophers. So, for those of us who are familiar with the channel, you would know that I have... Oh, hey guys. I've talked about the Plato's Republic before, and it was in book... I think it's book 5, I don't remember.
The Vex controlling the simulation have been alerted to your presence. They've begun to shift the terrain.
That's Osiris. He's a baller. I like him a lot. I think he's really cool. So, as I was saying, there is this... there's this push. Sorry, not this push. I'm getting ahead of myself. So in the earliest episode, I talked about Plato's Republic, and more specifically, I talked about the allegory of the cave, which occurs in the Republic, which...
By the way, the Vex have you on a time limit.
Oh, good.
Don't let those fall and escape.
I'm going to fail. I'm real bad at this. Oh, I'm going to super fail. I hate this one. So this quest can manifest in like 3 variations. I'm in the middle of a quest right now. This is my second take on this recording. I'll be fully honest about that one. I did not like the first one, so I'm re-recording. But I wanted to continue my progress in this mission, so that's what's happening. Plain and simple. I like it. Boop for Snoop. What's up? So as I was saying... Oh, hey, guys. Oh, you can die as fast as like there. Now, you super dead to take it all back. Oh, you are also super dead. Oh, look at that.
Use caution. This particular simulation is constantly adapting.
Yeah, whatever. This is where I die up here. Don't,
try not to look down.
Thanks, Shigera. Great advice. Yeah, that'll work. So, as we're talking about philosophy, or philosophers, so when we talked about the Republic initially, we talked about the allegory of the cave, which Plato uses as an argument to kind of discertain what it is to be a philosopher, and what is knowledge truly is, right? And he wants to make the argument that human understanding is not really, like, accurate. You know, there's more to the picture that we don't get to look at. And that is vitally important, I would argue. Oh, that was fun. I'll take that. I'm gonna die here. Oh, maybe I won't. Good. Boop! Yeah, that's right back. So, the allegory of the cave is where Plato makes the argument for what is knowledge and what isn't knowledge. And how broken human knowledge actually is. He makes a pretty good case for it, obviously, you know, there's no real arguments from me. Because there certainly is more that we don't understand than there is that we do understand. Like, it feels like what we know is a drop in the bucket of this ocean of knowledge. But we're going to look more at the Republic itself, because Plato does use the Republic as kind of a roadmap for how nation-states and how the world should run. And at the head of it, he puts philosophers, right? And he's very clear about that. And go away! Why did you just spawn so close? Okay, well, I guess I deserve that. I was being arrogant. So Plato puts philosophers at the top because he believes that, or at least from when you're reading the text, that intellectualism should be at the forefront of any governing body. Rule should be ruled through, or man should be ruled by mind, not heart. Is kind of like the bottom line. You know, if somebody is using their brain to run a company, run a nation, they're less likely to lead that nation astray, right? Go away. No, I don't need to fight you, do I? No, I can ignore you. I'm just... Oh, I can't ignore you, can I? Damn it! Oh, that's garbage. There's bombs over there. I give you grenades. Now you're both dead. So how does that make
The
you feel?
combination of constants and variables in this simulation is fascinating.
I'm sure it is,
Rigid
Osiris.
structure and movement, dynamism and engagement, all within a strict framework.
Yep, it's great.
Beautiful. Fortunately, I must destroy it when you're finished.
That's great. Cool. Super happy for you, buddy. I'm getting shot at, so if you could stop being all romantic with your verbiage, and this is where I'm gonna die right here. Boop. Yep, instant death. Plato's Republic puts philosophers at the top of the ruling pyramid, as it were. Am I going the right way? I have no idea. Oh, those guys explode. And instant death again. Oh, Zhang. Made it just out of that one. Alright, out of the frying pan into the fire, as it were. What? Oh, there's just a guy escape. Well, now you're dead, so... I don't know how that makes you feel, but it makes me feel great! Yeah, so...
Nice.
Oh.
One more Vex master plan.
I've been able to do this on normal mode.
And we'll stop
Doing it on
them,
heroic
too.
has never happened for me
Just
before.
enjoy the moment.
So that's handy. I like that. Boom, collect loot. Nothing of value. Oh, I guess got Paradox Amplifier. That's cool. So as I was saying, Plato puts philosophers at the top of the ruling pyramid. He says philosophers are the only ones fit to rule. And he outlines things like removing art and poetry because they are not important to ruling. In fact, they could be a hindrance. But I really want to focus on just the talk of putting philosophers at the top of the pyramid. Pardon me. So, in the last episode, I mentioned that I would argue that Osiris is a philosopher, and arguably the coolest philosopher. He's badass. He's like Socrates in space with a gun, and I like that a lot. And we're gonna go visit Brother Vance at the lighthouse. So we're back on Mercury, where we ended the last episode. Don't shoot me. And Mercury is where the Infinite Forest is, and that's where Osiris lives, essentially, after being exiled from the Vanguard. Which is of merit and of note. So this is the lighthouse. I think I may have talked about it briefly. This is the temple where people who followed Osiris after his banishment worship him. This is Brother Vance, who I want to punch in the face most of the time. I don't like him. He's a loud jackass. I felt a little bit like my dad saying that. I kind of wish I didn't. But I kind of wanted to talk about the Republic and how it falls short of dealing with how philosophers are, why philosophers are fit to rule. But I also want to talk about how Osiris kind of fits into that mold, and how he kind of paints a picture of the philosopher being unfit to rule. And I think he does a really good job of demonstrating why philosophy taken to an extreme can be toxic. Plato, who suggests that that philosophers are fit to rule, he doesn't give the roadmap for any specific type of philosopher, but I assume in his own weird Oedipus masturbatory student teacher sexual fantasy of him and Socrates, he imagines all philosophers as to be Socrates. I think it's kind of arrogant and presumptuous and wrong to speculate that when he says philosophers, he means just philosophers. I think for the time when he was discussing philosophers, he meant anybody who was an intellectual. And because philosophers back in the day were also scientists, they were mathematicians, they were the pioneers, they're the ones who looked at the stars, they were astronomers. Yeah, I almost said astrologists, and that would have been a really shitty idea, because they were not I mean, I guess some of them were a little bit astrology-like, and some of them were, of lesser importance to Plato, or would have been anyways, I suppose. Like Heraclitus, who, put out suppositions like wantonness needs putting out even more so than a house fire. Heraclitus was not a majestic stallion of a man all the time. He was kind of abrupt and rude. Neat. Oh, hey, is that another Warlock? It's a Warlock and a Titan. This will be fun.
Operation Caliban online.
Sounds good.
Guardians, you're
Boom.
here for a top priority
Oh,
extraction.
that was fun.
We have multiple fire teams
Go.
missing.
Oh,
They went into the arcology to
I'm gonna die.
investigate a
Yep.
heavily
Sheldon
guarded
dead.
hive ritual.
I'm alright with
They
that.
had zero contact for the last several hours. Which
Thanks,
is why we
friend.
need you.
So, Osiris creates this image of somebody who is not fit to rule, and admittedly, I think he's still really cool, and I would argue that, like, given the opportunity... Oh, our other teammate died. Okay, well, I'll go get him. This is gonna be, like, hella boring and redundant and kind of quiet, because we're starting off slow, and this particular strike is pretty slow. But, I'll take care of this guy, because he was kind enough to revive me. And then, let's try this again. Whee! Let's do it. So yeah, we're gonna scooch right back here. So, when we talked about Osiris in the last episode, we know that he was the previous leader of the Vanguard. He is what Zavala was beforehand, but he was banished for getting too close to the Vex and for almost leading to the destruction of the Vanguard and the Traveler. And that's kind of important because Osiris is definitely an example of a philosopher, as are most Warlocks. When you look at how Warlocks operate, Warlocks are inarguably philosophers. But Osiris was an entirely different breed of philosopher, right? He was special, and his obsession with the Vex. Really? There we go. Okay. His obsession with the Vex moved from interest or intellectual intellectual. Oh, I'm trying to think of the best word.
These logs
Like,
are
I
brand new.
I'm trying to.
must have
I
just
want to
sealed
word
this
this carefully. You know, from
Heads
intellectual
up, Caliban.
fascination
We show fallen
to an
inbound
intellectual
toward your current
obsession.
position.
Oh, I don't care. Whatever. And I think that's an important distinction because Osiris was a philosopher, he was a philosopher with clearly had power and charisma. When you consider the relationship he and Ikora Rey have, where despite his near destruction of the Vanguard, Ikora still has, feelings of regret for having him banished and welcomes him back into the fold at the end of the DLC campaign. So he clearly wasn't just hyper intelligent. He was charismatic in some fashion. People liked him. And he had a cult following, right? There was a group of people who left the Vanguard to follow him into his exile. So he clearly garnered some respect. And that's important, right? Because he wasn't just crazy smart, which means he probably passed more than a small subset of the criteria that Plato would have used to deviate philosophers who should be rulers from philosophers who should not be rulers. But the bottom line for Plato was intellectualism, or philosophers and intellectuals were what should be the ruling class. And in the thought experiment, as it were, of the Destiny 2 universe, philosophers almost brought about, having a philosopher ruler, almost brought about the destruction of the world. It's almost as if it's acceptable to have philosophers be, number 2, but they should never be number 1. And a part of me wants to agree with that statement, because many of the examples we have of philosophers at work are catastrophic. Philosophers as rulers have some degree of success, presumably. Alexander the Great, I suppose, would qualify as a philosopher, as he was said to have one of the world's largest libraries, and we're going to use the word philosophy in its most loose, basic term.
Cannot find a way forward. There is no shame in retreat.
No such thing, Zavala. Retreat's not a word in my dictionary.
We understand, but we agreed to this mission. No one's backing down. Commander, are you there?
Neat.
Get away from him! I won't let you transform him!
I've got a lock on that transmission. Let's go.
Caliban, do you copy? Caliban, do you copy?
Well. That is fun. So now that all the craziness has died down, and we're back to just me shooting and nobody talking to me, this
Broadcast came from this room.
this supposition
That guard.
that philosophies should be rulers, I guess this proposition by Plato that philosophers should be rulers, is almost nullified in the thought experiment that is the story of Osiris. He is a philosopher. He's charismatic. He is hyper intelligent. You know, he's capable of greatness. Boom! Why are you shooting at that? I know where I'm going. Big dummy.
Void light can only be created by guardians.
You got
I
him.
don't understand how the Hive got their claws
Oh
on it.
nope, he got him. So when we look at the philosophical context of Osiris, and we look at who he was, the philosopher, and who he was, the ruler, we see this kind of disconnect between the romanticization by Plato of intellectual rulers and what they're actually capable of. You know, and obviously I would argue that like it's certainly better to have a smart ruler than a dumb ruler, as is the current case in the United States of America, with a president whose IQ is certainly not greater than a loaf of moldy bread. Yeah, okay, great.
No wonder they don't want company.
But obviously, going in the opposite direction and becoming hyper-intelligent
Anybody in the rig listening? I
is
swear I just heard a voice.
is counterintuitive, because
I'm just gonna keep
in the
going
case of
and
Osiris, his
hoping
hyperintelligence
it's
manifests in
better.
a form of a chronic obsession, and that is the case with a lot of hyperintelligence. It's not a single ubiquitous or not ubiquitous. It's not like a multitude. You become great at everything, and you have like an incredibly high intelligence. Like more often than not, people who are intelligent because they have specialized in one field with great like focus, right? They're so centered on discovering the story of one specific existence. That's it. Or like one field of study, or they got really good at one thing. Like when we look at professional athletes, and like professionals in like the intellectual sciences and social sciences and like actual sciences, there is a lot of time spent specializing, and I think that might be why Plato proposed a republic, and why the Vanguard operates on a set of 3 and not a single individual. And obviously there's that mechanism that it just makes sense to have one leader from each class for the sake of driving the story, but I think Bungie does a really good job of creating the case for a republic, because when it was just Osiris leading, he brought about... Oh, pardon me. Sorry. He brought about ruin and destruction, and demonstrated that philosophers on their own are not fit to rule, almost in like a cerebral fashion. Oh, I'm gonna die here. Dude, don't just stand there like a goof. Drop a rift. Rift up, boy. You know, gotta save our buddy. Almost made it back to the rift. So, I think it's important to note that philosophers make okay rulers when we're held in check, because Ikora Ray is a student of
We came down here as a squad
our
of
friend
9.
Osiris.
Got picked off one by one.
Is in fact a
Watched
philosopher,
wizard
but
rip the light out of my best friend.
she
and funnel it
obviously
into some
engages
kind
in
of
spirituality
crystal.
more than Osiris would appear to be.
Harvest.
At least, and like that's just speculation, but Ikora's love of the Traveler extends to her being infuriated to no end when Io is tarnished by is tarnished by the Red Legion from the Cabal. And that's not really demonstrated, and it may just be because of limitations in story development, but it's not demonstrated that Osiris was a spiritual man. It's demonstrated that Osiris had a cult following who revered him in a spiritual fashion, but Osiris himself seems, I mean, certainly unlimited in his own, like, belief in his intellectual and physical capabilities, but more importantly, he doesn't seem like he's overjoyed in spiritual. Like, the fact that he accepted his banishment and didn't, like, refuse his cult following should indicate that his appreciation for the Traveler has some kind of limiting variable. And I think that's kind of important to note. So I think we're about to wrap up. Oh, really? We're going to wrap up today's episode. We're running a little on the long side. I've been running long in the tooth on this one because I'm trying to trying to argue for a case against philosophers as rulers, but Ikora really clearly demonstrates that they can be okay rulers, and that's important to remember. Go away. Vote the snoot. Go away. So that's going to be it for today's episode, everybody. We probably won't be looking at Destiny for a while unless something crazy comes out. Or I guess we probably won't be looking at Destiny ever again unless something crazy comes out. And that is not impossible, nor improbable. But I hope you enjoyed the series on Destiny, and I hope you enjoyed the parts about our good friend Osiris and the evolution of philosophers as rulers as they come about. As philosophers as leaders as rulers as they come about as well. That's as important because that's kind of what's happening here. Boop the snoot. Oh yeah, caused some real friction there. But thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to chatting with everybody on the next episode. So thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out the Scholarly Gamers website, and I will see everybody in the next video. Bye for now.